Babylon is a mysterious city. On one hand, its name is known to 99 out of 100 people, but on the other hand, only a few can say more about it than that it was an ancient state with a famous tower. We will correct this injustice over the next few minutes, but we will do it elegantly. The main mistake of those who try to describe Babylon is diving into a heap of confusing terms, referring to the Bible, mentioning dozens of peoples nobody has ever heard of, and complicating the narrative. Over the next 10 minutes, we will take a simpler approach. We will organize the history of Babylon clearly yet understandably. Alexander the Great, Hammurabi, Nebuchadnezzar, and many other famous figures will visit us. People you have heard of but only know superficially. Let's start with the fact that we are talking about a city, not a country. However, Babylon often served as the capital of powerful empires, both those it conquered itself and those it inherited. The exact date of the city's founding is unknown, but scholars agree it was somewhere around the 25th century BCE. To imagine the depth of its antiquity, this is roughly the same period when the Great Pyramid of Khufu was being built in ancient Egypt. Does this make the Babylonians less ancient than the Egyptians? Absolutely not. Due to problems with groundwater, excavations on its territory are often difficult. Yet, even in preserved texts, there are mentions of so-called first generations, peoples who were already considered ancient, even by those who lived 4.5 millennia ago. It is possible that they lived precisely on the site of Babylon. After all, there is clear evidence of the Sumerian civilization that existed there, which for the ancient Romans was just as old as we are for modern people. A clever loop of time. Babylon was located 80 kilometers south of modern Baghdad in Iraq. Its location was ideal for the time, near the Persian Gulf, close to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and with plenty of space for irrigation and agriculture. Comparisons with neighboring Egypt suggest themselves. In any case, during the first few centuries, Babylon was a provincial town within the Sumerian Akkadian kingdom, which covered the territories of modern Syria, Iraq, Iran, and several other countries. It stood out only due to the presence of a royal governor who collected taxes. But by the end of the second millennium BCE, the kingdom fell apart, and a bunch of small states immediately began fighting each other. During these internal conflicts, somewhere in the 19th century BCE, Babylon rose to prominence. The Amorites, who captured it under the leadership of Sumu Abum, founded a dynasty here, beginning the era of the Old Babylonian Kingdom. This era lasted a couple of centuries and was marked by Babylon conquering almost all of Mesopotamia, from the Persian Gulf in the south to Nineveh in the north. And then came a figure named Hammurabi, whom you probably know but cannot imagine in his true power. Hammurabi was the sixth ruler of this dynasty. He united most of the lands and issued numerous laws. Imagine, the 18th century BCE, and there was already legislation in the Babylonian kingdom. True, it was not very gentle. A builder could be executed for a poorly built house, a doctor could have his hands cut off for a failed operation, and anyone hiding slaves would be immediately hanged. These laws were engraved on steles and displayed throughout the country, which hints at the relative education of the population. This also points to the Babylonians' achievements in astronomy, or more precisely, astrology. They tried to predict fate based on the movement of Venus, while the study of the cosmos was the exclusive domain of priests. Nevertheless, the study of stars and planets 4,000 years ago is worthy of respect, as is the construction of numerous shrines, monuments, and luxurious palaces from an architectural standpoint. The Babylonians were skilled in mathematics and geometry. However, researchers believe that they invented little on their own, mostly relying on the work of their Sumerian ancestors, which has not survived. However, cultural and social conflicts between free people, the king, and slaves weakened the state, and Babylon suffered raids, first by mountain tribes, then by the Hittites from what is now Turkey. Eventually, power passed to the Kassites, mountain tribes who, however, treated Babylon favorably. They restored temples and promoted traditional culture. Unfortunately, they were not skilled in politics, causing a crisis in the agricultural sector and complete dependence on Egypt, both economically and politically. As a result, a weakened Babylon was captured by the Elamites from Iran in 1155 BCE. The city gradually lost influence and for some time was not the capital of its own state. Attempts at revival alternated with failures. In 729 BCE, the Babylonian kingdom became part of Semitic Assyria, but culture, science, and education remained. Thus, the Assyrians preferred to keep Babylon as a separate kingdom, and they paid for it. Babylonian kings dreamed of revival, which began in 626 BCE, with the coronation of Nabopolassar, who started returning the city to greatness. This was completed by the famous Nebuchadnezzar II in the 6th century BCE. Babylon acquired almost all historical lands and added new ones. The city housed 200,000 people, surrounded by massive walls and a moat. According to legend, Nebuchadnezzar built the legendary Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the world. However, their existence is still disputed. Some scholars believe they were invented or that they were in Nineveh. Nebuchadnezzar is also associated with Babylon's negative image in the Bible. As mentioned, Babylon freed itself from Assyria and pursued not-so-peaceful policies toward the Semites. In 586 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem and forcibly relocated the Jews to Babylon, carrying out repressions. Many consider the Babylonian captivity a key moment in the formation of the Jewish community and identity. This gave rise to prophecies about the destruction of Babylon, floods, and other divine punishments symbolized by the story of the Tower of Babel, after which people supposedly began speaking different languages and Babylon fell. It is worth noting that Jewish writings also contain positive mentions of Babylon. Yet the prophecy of destruction came true. In 539 BCE, it was captured by the Persians, who destroyed almost everything, but not entirely. King Cyrus treated the Babylonians kindly and did not interfere with their daily lives. At this time, Herodotus visited Babylon, describing it as one of the largest and most beautiful cities on earth, even despite the destruction of many structures. Only in 479 BCE, in response to another rebellion, King Xerxes deprived the city of autonomy, but only temporarily. In any story of that era, sooner or later, a name appears that turns everything upside down: Alexander the Great. He swept through the world like a hurricane and did not overlook Babylon. By analogy with Egypt, Alexander ordered the restoration of shrines and the reconstruction of the legendary Tower of Babylon. Later, he even declared Babylon his capital. Unfortunately, in 323 BCE, the conqueror of the world suddenly died, and with him, most plans for rebuilding Babylon and restoring its power were buried. After this, Babylon never became mighty again. For some time, Hellenistic culture prevailed. Greek theaters and temples were built, and gods merged. Eastern Nergal fused with Heracles, Marduk with Zeus. Babylon continued to exist. Even parts of the legendary tower nearby were converted into a theater. A nearby city was founded, where some residents were partially resettled. But subsequent Middle Eastern conflicts finally finished off Babylon. The Parthian Empire, founded by Scythians, the Syro-Persians, and even the Romans. Almost everyone ruled it. Its location in a war-prone zone gradually destroyed the city, deterring people from living in the cursed place. Historians cannot determine the exact moment when once great Babylon became completely empty. Some say it died during the resettlement to nearby Seleucia. Others refer to Crusader records suggesting it still stood in the 12th century CE. The problem is that cities named Babylon existed in Egypt and even in Europe. In reality, the original city gradually merged into nearby Seleucia. The Romans, upon capturing it, marveled at its scale, calling it great. Then a plague struck, weakening the empire. The new Babylon was moved even further by the Persians, named Ctesiphon, and for a time served as the capital of the Parthian Empire. Then came the Arab invasions, which staged another party in the Middle East, which, in a sense, continues to this day. Thus, the real reason for Babylon's disappearance is simple decline and the impossibility of in-depth study of its history, as wars have raged on the excavation sites for 200 years. Even during World War I, the British and Turkish armies fought on the ruins of Babylon. It so happened that human aggression thoroughly battered the Middle East, and with it, Babylon. That concludes its story. If you enjoyed this conversation, we would appreciate a like. See you next time, friends!